What if I told you that a desperate mother in the late 1920s discovered a prayer technique so powerful it could heal her dying child when every doctor had given up hope? But before we begin, please hit the like button and let me know where in the world you're watching from today. It's always fascinating seeing who's joining us from around the world. The woman had tried everything: countless medical consultations, experimental treatments, even visits to different spiritual healers. Nothing worked. Her child was slipping away, and traditional medicine offered no solutions. Then she encountered Edgar Cayce, a man who would soon become known as America's greatest psychic, and what he told her would shock not only her, but his own stenographer, who was frantically taking notes in the corner of the room. Has this ever happened to you? Have you ever felt like your prayers were hitting some invisible wall, bouncing back without reaching their destination? This mother certainly felt that way. She had been praying desperately for months, pouring her heart out to God, begging for her child's healing. But Cayce revealed something that would change everything. Her very approach to prayer was actually blocking the divine healing energy from flowing to her child. What happened next in that small room would reverberate through decades of spiritual understanding. The stenographer, Gladys Davis, had documented thousands of Cayce's readings, but what she witnessed that day left her speechless. This wasn't just another psychic prediction or mystical insight. This was a complete revelation about how divine connection actually works, turning conventional spiritual wisdom completely upside down. Stay with me until the end, because what you're about to discover might surprise you. Over the span of 4 remarkable decades, Edgar Cayce would conduct more than 14,000 documented readings, each one meticulously recorded and archived. These weren't stories that grew with time or legends that became distorted through retelling. Every single word was preserved, creating an unprecedented library of spiritual wisdom that continues to transform lives today at the Association for Research and Enlightenment in Virginia Beach. But here's what makes this story truly extraordinary. Cayce didn't just help one desperate mother. Through those thousands of readings, he uncovered 7 divine teachings that consistently produced miraculous results. People who had struggled for years with unanswered prayers suddenly found themselves experiencing profound spiritual breakthroughs. Those who felt disconnected from God discovered a direct line of communication that seemed almost too good to be true. The medical establishment initially dismissed Cayce as just another charlatan, but then something undeniable began happening. Hundreds, then thousands of people started experiencing healing by following his guidance. Skeptical doctors found themselves referring patients to this Kentucky mystic who seemed to access information that defied all conventional understanding. What you're about to discover isn't just historical curiosity or outdated spiritual practices. These 7 divine teachings that Edgar Cayce revealed are as powerful today as they were nearly a century ago, and they might hold the key to the spiritual connection you've been desperately seeking. The question is, are you ready to discover what that desperate mother learned and why it changed everything? Consider subscribing if this content speaks to you. We dive into transformative principles often, and having you on this journey creates a stronger sense of shared discovery. The transformation that desperate mother experienced wasn't a one-time miracle or some unexplainable phenomenon that disappeared into history. Today, at the Association for Research and Enlightenment in Virginia Beach, these exact same methods continue producing profound results in people's lives. These aren't theoretical concepts that sound beautiful on paper, but fail when put to the test. They're practical, step-by-step techniques that create measurable shifts in how people connect with divine energy. What makes this even more remarkable is how Cayce's first divine teaching completely revolutionizes everything we've been taught about prayer. Think about your own prayer life for a moment. Most of us approach prayer exactly the way we were taught. We talk to God, we ask for things, we present our requests, and hope something good happens. But Cayce discovered that this traditional approach is actually counterproductive. He revealed that most people pray completely wrong, essentially talking to a wall instead of creating genuine divine connection. This revelation didn't come from religious study or theological training. Edgar Cayce was born in rural Kentucky in 1877, a simple country boy who discovered something extraordinary about himself as a young man. While in a self-induced trance state, he could diagnose illnesses in people he had never met, recommend treatments that baffled trained doctors, and access information that seemed impossible to obtain through normal means. The journey that led to this discovery began when Cayce was just 21 years old. He had developed a severe throat condition that left him unable to speak above a whisper. Doctors couldn't help him, and his condition was destroying his ability to work. In desperation, he tried something unusual. He put himself into the same trance state he had experimented with as a child. While unconscious, he began speaking in a clear, strong voice, describing his own condition and prescribing a treatment that would cure him completely. Word of this incredible ability spread quickly through small-town Kentucky. People began coming to Cayce with their own mysterious illnesses, desperate for answers that conventional medicine couldn't provide. What they discovered was that this unassuming man could enter a trance state and access detailed medical information about complete strangers, often providing solutions that seemed to come from some unlimited source of wisdom. But here's where the story takes an unexpected turn that reveals the hidden truth behind divine connection. As Cayce's reputation grew and more people sought his help, he began receiving information that went far beyond medical diagnoses. During these trance sessions, he started accessing spiritual insights and revelations about the nature of prayer, meditation, and human consciousness that would challenge every assumption about how we connect with the divine. Now, I want to go even deeper into this first revolutionary teaching that shocked everyone who witnessed it, because understanding this single principle could completely transform your entire spiritual journey and unlock access to divine guidance you never thought possible. Write in the comments, "I'm ready for this transformation," if you're feeling that shift in your understanding right now. What made Edgar Cayce's revelations absolutely undeniable was the meticulous documentation that surrounded every single session. This wasn't just folklore or stories passed down through generations that became embellished over time. Gladys Davis, his dedicated stenographer, sat in that room for over 40 years, recording every word that came through Cayce during his trance states. Every diagnosis, every spiritual insight, every revolutionary teaching was captured in real time and preserved in what would become one of the most extraordinary archives of spiritual wisdom ever assembled. These transcripts aren't hidden away in some dusty vault or available only to scholars. You can actually visit the Association for Research and Enlightenment headquarters today and read these original documents for yourself. The impact of having this level of documentation cannot be overstated. It transforms Cayce's work from mysterious legends into verifiable experiences that changed real people's lives in measurable ways. The medical establishment's journey from skepticism to acceptance tells its own compelling story. Initially, trained physicians dismissed Cayce as just another charlatan taking advantage of desperate people. The idea that an uneducated man from Kentucky could provide accurate medical diagnoses while unconscious seemed absolutely ridiculous to the scientific community. But then something undeniable began happening that forced even the most skeptical doctors to reconsider their assumptions. The cures started happening with such consistency that they couldn't be ignored. Hundreds of people who had exhausted every conventional treatment option began experiencing dramatic healing by following Cayce's guidance. These weren't just minor improvements or placebo effects. They were complete reversals of serious medical conditions that had stumped qualified physicians. Word spread through medical circles, and gradually skeptical doctors found themselves quietly referring their most difficult cases to this remarkable man who seemed to access unlimited medical knowledge. But behind the scenes of these physical healings, Cayce was uncovering something even more revolutionary about the hidden mechanics of divine connection. His first divine teaching reveals that prayer isn't about asking God for things, presenting our requests, or hoping our words somehow reach heaven. Instead, prayer is about creating what he called vibrational alignment, a state where divine energy can flow through you naturally and powerfully. If this exploration sparked something inside you or shifted your perspective on divine connection, a like lets me know this content is creating meaningful impact. This completely transforms the entire dynamic of spiritual communication. Rather than positioning ourselves as beggars, hoping for divine attention, we become active participants in an energy exchange that connects us directly to the source of all healing and wisdom. People who applied this method didn't just experience occasional answered prayers. They reported consistent healing, clear guidance, and spiritual breakthroughs that seemed to flow effortlessly once they understood this fundamental principle. Now, I want to explore exactly how this vibrational alignment works and why understanding this single concept could revolutionize your entire approach to spiritual connection. Because what Cayce discovered about the actual mechanics of prayer will challenge everything you thought you knew about communicating with the divine. Write in the comments, vibrational alignment, if this revelation is already shifting how you think about prayer. The technique itself represents a complete reversal of everything we've been conditioned to believe about spiritual communication. Instead of talking to God, presenting our requests, or reciting memorized prayers, Cayce discovered that we must become still and listen. He called this profound practice, entering the silence, and it's fundamentally different from any traditional prayer method you've probably encountered. Here's where most people get confused about this process, and understanding this distinction could be the breakthrough that transforms your entire spiritual journey. You're not trying to hear actual words or waiting for some booming voice from heaven. Instead, you're opening yourself to receive energy, impressions, and a deep knowing that flows directly from the source of all creation. It's more like tuning into a frequency than having a conversation, and once you understand this shift in approach, everything changes. The practical impact of this revelation becomes immediately clear when you look at Cayce's consistent guidance to people struggling with financial problems. He repeatedly told individuals facing economic hardship that if they spent just 10 minutes each morning practicing this type of prayer, their material situations would transform within months. This wasn't wishful thinking or positive psychology. The documented results in the archives show that people who applied this specific technique experienced dramatic improvements in their financial circumstances with remarkable consistency. But here's the hidden truth that explains why so many sincere spiritual seekers struggle for years without experiencing breakthrough. Most meditation and prayer practices fail because they're like trying to tune into a clear radio station while massive static interference drowns out the signal. Cayce helped countless people who had been meditating diligently for years without ever achieving real spiritual connection. And what he discovered about their approach reveals a fundamental flaw in how most of us pursue divine communion. The problem isn't lack of sincerity or insufficient effort. These were dedicated individuals who had invested significant time and energy into their spiritual practices. The issue was that they were attempting to connect with divine consciousness, while their internal systems were cluttered with mental noise, emotional turbulence, and energetic blockages that made clear reception impossible. It's like trying to have a meaningful conversation in a room where multiple televisions are blasting at full volume. This revelation led Cayce to develop his second divine teaching, which addresses the crucial preparation phase that most spiritual traditions completely overlook. Understanding this foundational principle could explain why your own meditation practice might feel challenging or unproductive, and implementing these preparation techniques could unlock the spiritual connection you've been seeking. Now, I want to reveal exactly what this preparation process involves and why clearing these specific types of interference could be the missing piece that finally allows you to experience the profound divine connection that transformed thousands of lives through Cayce's guidance. Write in the comments, "I need this preparation," if you're recognizing how static interference might be blocking your own spiritual connection. The secret behind this preparation process involves what Cayce called purification, but this isn't what most people immediately think when they hear that word. He wasn't talking about moral purity, following strict religious rules, or adhering to complicated spiritual disciplines. Instead, Cayce meant something far more practical and transformative, clearing the specific mental and emotional static that blocks divine reception by addressing the exact thoughts, emotions, and even physical conditions that create interference with spiritual communication. This revelation represents a complete paradigm shift in how we approach spiritual development. Most traditions focus on adding more practices, learning more techniques, or following more rules. But Cayce discovered that the real breakthrough comes from removing the obstacles that are already preventing clear divine connection. It's like cleaning a dirty window rather than trying to see through multiple layers of grime. What makes this approach so revolutionary is how Cayce understood that body, mind, and spirit operate as completely interconnected systems. You can't have clear spiritual connection if your physical body is overwhelmed with toxins or your emotional landscape is chaotic and unbalanced. This is why his readings consistently included specific dietary recommendations, physical exercises, and emotional healing practices alongside the spiritual guidance. He saw the whole person as one integrated system where each component directly impacts the others. This holistic understanding reveals why so many sincere spiritual seekers hit frustrating plateaus in their development. They might be doing everything right spiritually while completely neglecting their physical health or carrying unresolved emotional trauma that creates constant internal turbulence. The impact of this fragmented approach is that divine energy simply cannot flow clearly through a system that's congested with interference from multiple sources. But here's where Cayce's insights become even more profound and transformative. He revealed that purification isn't just about removing negative influences from your life. The real breakthrough comes from actively cultivating what he called Christ consciousness, a specific state of awareness that aligns you perfectly with divine will and purpose. This represents a fundamental shift in mindset from trying to eliminate problems to actually embodying the solution. Christ consciousness, in Cayce's understanding, isn't about religious doctrine or theological beliefs. It's about accessing a level of awareness where your thoughts, emotions, and decisions naturally flow in harmony with divine wisdom. People who experience this state of consciousness didn't just recover from physical ailments or solve their immediate problems. They reported complete transformation that touched every aspect of their existence. Now, I want to explore exactly how this Christ consciousness manifests in practical terms and reveal the specific techniques Cayce gave for accessing this extraordinary state of awareness that could revolutionize not just your spiritual life, but your entire approach to making decisions and navigating challenges. Write in the comments, Christ Consciousness Awakening, if you're feeling drawn to explore this deeper level of spiritual awareness. The documented testimonials from people who accessed this Christ consciousness during the challenging war years reveal just how profound this transformation actually becomes. These individuals didn't just experience minor improvements or gentle shifts in their spiritual awareness. They reported complete transformation that was so dramatic Their previous lives seemed like they had been living in darkness, stumbling around without any real understanding of what divine connection could actually feel like. If these teachings resonated with you, I'd love to have you subscribe. We explore practical spiritual wisdom like this regularly, and your presence makes these conversations even more meaningful. What makes these accounts so compelling is the consistency of the experiences across different people, backgrounds, and circumstances. During some of the most difficult periods in modern history, when fear and uncertainty dominated the collective mindset, these individuals found themselves operating from a completely different level of consciousness. They weren't just surviving the challenges around them. They were thriving with a sense of inner peace and divine guidance that seemed almost supernatural to observers. This leads us into Cayce's third divine teaching, which reveals something absolutely fascinating about the hidden mechanics of how divine energy actually enters and moves through the human body. Cayce discovered that everyone has what he called spiritual centers, specific points in your physical being where divine energy enters and flows through your entire system. Most people have never heard of these centers, and even fewer understand how to work with them consciously. Think about the implications of this revelation for a moment. If there are actual specific locations in your body where divine energy naturally wants to flow, and if these centers can be activated and developed, then spiritual connection isn't just some vague, ethereal experience that happens randomly. It becomes something practical and tangible that you can learn to access deliberately. The impact of understanding and activating these spiritual centers becomes immediately clear when you examine the documented cases from the 1940s, archived at the Association for Research and Enlightenment. People who learned to work with these centers didn't just report feeling more spiritual or experiencing occasional moments of inspiration. They began having visions, developing healing abilities, and establishing direct communication with higher spiritual beings that completely transformed their understanding of reality. These weren't individuals who had spent decades in monasteries or devoted their entire lives to spiritual study. They were ordinary people who learned specific techniques for awakening these dormant spiritual centers within their own bodies. The journey from spiritual struggle to profound divine connection often happened remarkably quickly once they understood how to work with these natural energy points. Now, I want to reveal exactly where these spiritual centers are located in your body and share the specific activation techniques that Cayce gave for awakening these dormant gateways to divine consciousness, because understanding this could be the breakthrough that finally gives you access to the level of spiritual experience you've been seeking. Write in the comments, "Activate my centers," if you're ready to discover these hidden gateways to divine energy within your own body. What makes Cayce's approach so practical and accessible is that he didn't just reveal the existence of these spiritual centers, he gave specific, detailed instructions for locating and activating each one within your own body. These weren't vague, mystical concepts that left people guessing about how to apply them. Cayce provided step-by-step guidance that people could follow immediately, and the results were consistently measurable and transformative. The impact of following these instructions becomes clear when you examine what happened to people who actually applied Cayce's techniques. They experienced fundamental changes in their consciousness and abilities that made spiritual connection feel natural and automatic, rather than something they had to struggle to achieve. It's like the difference between trying to force a door open and suddenly discovering you had the key all along. One remarkable case that perfectly illustrates this transformation involves a woman from the Midwest whose journey demonstrates just how quickly these techniques can work when applied correctly. She was an ordinary person with no particular spiritual background or psychic abilities, just someone who felt disconnected from divine guidance and was searching for a deeper spiritual experience. Following Cayce's specific instructions for awakening her spiritual centers, something extraordinary began happening within just a few weeks. She started receiving accurate impressions about people she had never met before, sensing information about their challenges, needs, and life circumstances that proved remarkably precise. But even more significant than developing these psychic abilities was the profound shift in her overall spiritual experience. She described feeling constantly connected to divine love in a way she had never experienced before, as if a direct line of communication had been established that provided continuous guidance and support. This transformation reveals something crucial about the hidden truth behind spiritual development. Once these centers are properly activated, extraordinary abilities and deep divine connection aren't occasional experiences that happen during meditation or prayer. They become your natural state of being, influencing every decision you make and every interaction you have throughout your day. But here's where Cayce's wisdom becomes even more profound and practical. He consistently emphasized that spiritual development must be balanced with genuine service to others. In several documented readings, he cautioned that developing psychic abilities or spiritual powers without a solid foundation of love and service could actually lead to spiritual problems rather than genuine growth. The mindset behind your spiritual development matters as much as the techniques themselves. Now I want to explore this crucial balance between spiritual power and service, because understanding this principle could be the difference between authentic spiritual growth and dangerous spiritual ego inflation that derails your entire journey toward genuine divine connection. Write in the comments, service and love, if you understand why this balance is essential for authentic spiritual development. This brings us to Cayce's fourth divine teaching, which reveals something that will fundamentally transform how you understand your relationship with the divine and your purpose on this earth. Cayce discovered that every single person has what he called an ideal, a spiritual blueprint that represents their highest divine purpose and reason for existing. But here's the hidden truth that explains so much spiritual struggle. Most people are living completely disconnected from this ideal, which creates a profound sense of emptiness and purposelessness despite all their sincere spiritual efforts. Think about your own spiritual journey for a moment. Have you ever felt like something was missing, even when you were doing all the right spiritual practices? That underlying sense that you're not quite living the life you're meant to live, or that there's some deeper purpose you haven't quite discovered yet. Cayce's revelation about spiritual ideals explains exactly why this happens and provides a clear path forward. The transformation that occurs when people finally connect with their true spiritual ideal is consistently dramatic and immediate. In documented case, after Cayce archived at the Association for Research and Enlightenment, individuals who had felt lost and purposeless for years suddenly found direction and meaning that energized every single aspect of their lives. This wasn't just a temporary boost of inspiration. It was a fundamental shift in how they approached decisions, relationships, and their daily existence. What makes this teaching so profound is that Cayce wasn't talking about finding your career path or discovering your talents, though those often become clear once you connect with your deeper purpose. He was revealing something much more significant, your soul's actual reason for being in physical form at this particular time in history. This goes far beyond any borrowed ideals from religious traditions or cultural expectations that you might have unconsciously adopted. The impact of this revelation becomes clear when you consider how many people spend their entire lives trying to fulfill purposes that were never actually theirs to begin with. They follow spiritual paths that don't resonate with their deepest nature, pursue goals that society told them were important, or try to serve God through methods that feel forced and unnatural. Meanwhile, their true divine blueprint remains dormant, waiting to be discovered and activated. If this exploration sparked something inside you or shifted your perspective on divine connection, a like lets me know this content is creating meaningful impact. During the Late 1930s, Cayce worked with struggling ministers and spiritual seekers who had devoted their lives to serving God but felt constantly frustrated and ineffective. Through his readings, he revealed that they were trying to serve through borrowed ideals rather than connecting with their own unique divine blueprint. Once they identified and began living from their authentic spiritual purpose, their work transformed completely. Now, I want to reveal the specific method Cayce developed for discovering your own spiritual ideal, because understanding and living from this divine blueprint could be the missing piece that finally brings meaning, direction, and supernatural effectiveness to every area of your life. Write in the comments, "Show me my purpose," if you're ready to discover the spiritual ideal that could transform your entire life journey. The method Cayce developed for discovering your authentic spiritual ideal is both simple and profound, requiring deep meditation combined with specific questions designed to help you penetrate through layers of cultural conditioning and religious programming to reach your soul's true purpose. This isn't about analyzing your personality or considering what others expect from you. It's about accessing the deepest level of your consciousness, where your divine blueprint has been waiting patiently to be recognized and activated. The process can be challenging because it often reveals that you've been living according to other people's expectations rather than following genuine divine guidance. Many people discover that their entire approach to spirituality has been shaped by family traditions, social pressures, or religious doctrines that never actually resonated with their deepest nature. This revelation can be uncomfortable at first, but it's also incredibly liberating because it explains why their spiritual efforts often felt forced or unfulfilling. What makes this discovery even more exciting is that your spiritual ideal isn't something static that you identify once and then follow for the rest of your life. Cayce revealed that these divine blueprints evolve as you grow spiritually, which means you're constantly discovering new dimensions and deeper layers of your purpose. This evolutionary aspect keeps your spiritual journey continuously renewed and prevents the stagnation that many people experience when they think they've figured everything out. This dynamic quality of spiritual ideals explains why people who apply Cayce's teachings report feeling constantly energized and excited about their spiritual development rather than bored or routine. Each new level of growth reveals fresh aspects of their divine purpose, creating an ongoing sense of discovery and expansion that makes the spiritual path feel like an adventure rather than a duty. But here's where Cayce's insights reveal something that could completely transform your understanding of what might be blocking your spiritual progress right now. His fifth divine teaching addresses something that prevents most people from accessing deep divine connection without them even realizing it's happening. Cayce discovered that unforgiveness, not just toward others, but toward yourself and even toward God, creates what he called spiritual poison that makes genuine divine communion absolutely impossible. This teaching goes far deeper than the surface-level forgiveness that most spiritual traditions discuss. Cayce identified hidden resentments and buried anger that people carry for years without conscious awareness. Yet these emotional toxins create energetic blockages that prevent divine light from flowing freely through their consciousness. Now, I want to explore exactly how these hidden unforgiveness patterns develop and reveal the specific techniques Cayce gave for identifying and clearing these spiritual blockages that might be sabotaging your connection with divine guidance without you even knowing it. Write in the comments, "Clear my blocks," if you suspect hidden unforgiveness might be interfering with your spiritual connection. The pattern Cayce discovered through hundreds of documented cases was absolutely consistent and revealing. He worked with sincere individuals who had been praying and meditating diligently for years, sometimes decades, without experiencing any significant spiritual breakthrough. These weren't casual seekers or people who lacked commitment. They were dedicated practitioners who had invested enormous time and energy into their spiritual development. Yet in almost every single case archived at the Association for Research and Enlightenment, the underlying blockage was unforgiveness that had created what Cayce called spiritual toxicity. What makes this revelation so shocking is that most of these people had no conscious awareness of carrying resentment. They considered themselves forgiving, loving individuals who had worked hard to release obvious anger and hurt from their past. But Cayce's techniques revealed layers of hidden resentment buried so deep in their consciousness that it had been sabotaging their spiritual progress without them ever realizing what was happening. The specific techniques Cayce developed for identifying and releasing these soul-level resentments go far beyond surface-level forgiveness exercises. He provided precise methods for accessing the deepest levels of consciousness where these toxic emotions hide, often disguised as other feelings or rationalized away through spiritual bypassing. Many people were absolutely shocked to discover through this process that they had been harboring profound anger toward God for allowing suffering, disappointment, or tragedy in their lives. One of the most powerful transformation stories in the archives involves a woman who had lost multiple children to illness and had spent decades carrying hidden rage toward God while maintaining all her religious practices. On the surface, she appeared to be a faithful, devoted believer who had accepted her losses with grace, but her spiritual life felt completely dead, and despite years of prayer and religious observance, she experienced no sense of divine connection or comfort. Through Cayce's guidance, documented in multiple readings, she discovered something that completely transformed her understanding of what had been blocking her spiritual breakthrough. Her anger toward God wasn't just about grief or loss. It was actually a form of spiritual pride. She had been unconsciously demanding that God conform to her limited human understanding of how divine love should work, essentially setting herself up as the judge of divine wisdom. This hidden pride had created an impenetrable barrier between her consciousness and divine grace. She wasn't truly surrendering to divine will, but rather harboring secret resentment that God wasn't operating according to her expectations and timeline. Now, I want to reveal exactly what happened when she finally released this spiritual pride and the miraculous transformation that followed, because understanding how forgiveness works at this deep, energetic level could be the key that finally removes the invisible barriers preventing divine light from flowing freely through your own consciousness. Write in the comments, "Release spiritual pride," if you recognize how your own expectations might be creating hidden barriers to divine connection. When she finally released this deeply buried resentment, through the process Cayce outlined, something absolutely miraculous happened that demonstrates the true power of soul-level forgiveness. According to the archived records, she didn't just experience emotional relief or psychological healing. She felt profound peace flooding through her entire being for the first time since her losses. But even more remarkable was what followed. She began receiving clear, consistent divine guidance that led her to reach out and help other grieving parents who were struggling with similar tragedies. Her pain wasn't just healed, it was completely transformed into a powerful ministry that touched thousands of lives. The very experiences that had created such spiritual toxicity became the foundation for her ability to bring comfort and healing to others walking through similar darkness. This transformation reveals something profound about how divine wisdom can take our deepest wounds and convert them into our greatest sources of strength and service. This brings us to a crucial understanding about what forgiveness actually accomplishes at the energetic level. Cayce revealed that true forgiveness isn't just about letting go of negative emotions or deciding to stop being angry. It's about clearing specific energetic blocks that prevent divine light from flowing freely through your entire being. When these blockages are removed, people consistently report being able to feel God's presence in a tangible, physical way for the first time in their lives. This energetic aspect of forgiveness explains why surface-level attempts at letting go often feel forced or incomplete. You might mentally decide to forgive someone, but if the energetic blockage remains in place, your spiritual connection will still feel clouded or restricted. The real breakthrough happens when forgiveness occurs at the soul level, clearing these invisible barriers that have been interfering with divine communion. This revelation leads us directly into Cayce's sixth divine teaching, which addresses one of the most common mistakes that actually pushes divine presence away, rather than inviting it closer. Cayce discovered that trying to connect with God through willpower and intense mental effort creates exactly the opposite effect of what we're hoping to achieve. Instead, true spiritual communion happens through what he called creative surrender, which is completely different from passive resignation or giving up. This teaching emerged from some of Cayce's most profound readings in the late 1930s, when he worked with people who had exhausted themselves trying to force spiritual experiences through intense practices and rigid disciplines. The harder they tried to control their spiritual development, the more distant God seemed to become. Now, I want to explore exactly what creative surrender means and reveal the specific shift in mindset that transforms spiritual struggle into effortless divine collaboration. Because understanding this principle could revolutionize your entire approach to connecting with divine consciousness. Write in the comments, creative surrender, if you're ready to discover how to stop pushing divine presence away through excessive effort. The breakthrough that Cayce revealed about creative surrender fundamentally transforms how we understand the entire dynamic of spiritual connection. Rather than viewing it as something we must achieve through intense effort or willpower, Cayce discovered that spiritual connection is actually a creative collaboration between human consciousness and divine will. You can't force this collaboration to happen, but you can create the ideal conditions that naturally invite it. Much like preparing a garden with rich soil and proper care, then allowing the seeds to grow according to their own natural timing and rhythm. This garden metaphor reveals something profound about the hidden mechanics of divine connection. Most people approach spirituality like they're trying to force plants to grow by pulling on them, when what's actually needed is patient preparation and trust in the natural process. The impact of understanding this shift in approach becomes immediately clear when you examine what happened to individuals who learned to apply this principle in their own spiritual development. One particularly remarkable case, documented in 1940, involves a frustrated seeker who had been practicing various spiritual disciplines intensively for 15 years without experiencing any significant results. This person had tried meditation retreats, fasting, complex prayer routines, and multiple spiritual traditions, yet consistently felt like they were hitting an invisible wall. They were exhausted from trying so hard to achieve spiritual states that seemed to elude them, no matter how much effort they invested. The transformation happened when Cayce guided them to shift from effortful striving to what he called creative receptivity. Instead of trying to climb up to divine consciousness through sheer determination, they learned to relax into it, creating space for divine presence to flow naturally into their awareness. According to the archived correspondence, within just a few days of applying this new approach, the person experienced what they described as falling into God's arms. Their spiritual practices became effortless and began producing the exact experiences they had been desperately seeking for over a decade. This reveals the most profound aspect of creative surrender. It doesn't mean becoming passive or lazy in your spiritual life. Instead, it means becoming an active participant in divine creativity rather than trying to control or direct the process according to your limited understanding. You shift from the mindset of someone begging for divine attention to becoming a co-creator with God, working in harmony with divine will. rather than fighting against it. Now, I want to explore Cayce's seventh and final divine teaching, which reveals something that may be his most revolutionary insight about connecting with God, because this discovery could give you direct access to unlimited divine wisdom and guidance in every area of your life. Write in the comments, co-creator with God, if this shift from effortful striving to creative collaboration resonates with your spiritual journey. Cayce's seventh and final divine teaching contains what may be his most revolutionary insight about connecting with God and accessing unlimited wisdom. He discovered that every single person has the ability to access what he called the Akashic Records, a cosmic library containing all knowledge and wisdom that has ever existed. This wasn't just theoretical speculation for Cayce. During his documented readings, he would routinely access detailed information about people's past lives, future possibilities, and spiritual lessons that couldn't possibly be obtained through normal means. Witnesses consistently documented case after case where Cayce's information proved accurate in ways that defied conventional explanation. He could describe events from centuries ago, predict future developments with remarkable precision, and provide insights about people's deepest spiritual needs that transformed their understanding of their life purpose. But here's what shocked even his closest associates and reveals the true power of this teaching. Cayce revealed that this extraordinary ability to access cosmic wisdom isn't unique to psychics or specially gifted individuals. Every person walking this earth has the exact same capacity to connect directly with this unlimited source of divine knowledge. The only thing preventing most people from accessing this cosmic library is simply not knowing how to properly attune their consciousness to receive divine wisdom. The practical impact of this revelation becomes immediately clear when you examine the documented cases from the early 1940s where Cayce taught ordinary people specific techniques for accessing higher wisdom. Teachers who learned these methods began receiving accurate guidance about their students that completely transformed their effectiveness in the classroom. Farmers started getting reliable impressions about weather patterns and crop management that dramatically increased their yields. Parents discovered they could receive profound insights about their children's needs, talents, and developmental challenges that enhanced their entire family dynamic. These weren't mystical experiences that happened occasionally during deep meditation. Once people learned the proper techniques, accessing divine guidance became a practical tool they could use for making everyday decisions with supernatural wisdom. Instead of guessing about important choices or relying solely on limited human analysis, they could tap directly into cosmic intelligence that provided information beyond anything their rational minds could produce. But perhaps the most profound aspect of this teaching is what Cayce revealed about the collective impact of people learning to access divine wisdom directly. He described how this creates what he called group consciousness, a collective awakening that accelerates spiritual evolution for everyone involved. As more individuals learn to connect with cosmic wisdom, it strengthens the entire field of consciousness, making it easier for others to access these same abilities. When you combine all 7 of these divine teachings together, you create a complete system for divine connection that goes far beyond traditional prayer and meditation. Each principle builds on the others. Proper vibrational prayer creates the foundation, purification clears the interference, spiritual center activation opens the gateways, discovering your ideal provides direction. Forgiveness removes the blocks, creative surrender allows divine flow, and Akashic Records access gives you unlimited wisdom for living your purpose fully. The people who applied all 7 teachings consistently during Cayce's lifetime reported experiences that seemed miraculous, but were actually the natural result of proper spiritual alignment. They found themselves guided by divine wisdom in every situation, protected by spiritual forces, and able to serve others in ways that created profound healing and transformation. These revelations aren't ancient history that worked in a different era. The principles Cayce uncovered are as powerful today as they were nearly a century ago, and the spiritual awakening he predicted for this time period appears to be happening all around us right now. People everywhere are feeling called to discover authentic divine connection beyond traditional religious structures. If this conversation has resonated with something deep inside you, I'd love for you to become part of this community that's exploring these life-changing spiritual principles together. Subscribe to the channel because we dive into practical wisdom like this regularly, and having you here makes these discussions even more meaningful. Leave a comment saying, "This message was meant for me," if you made it all the way through this journey with me today. It's always incredible to see who feels called to go deeper into these transformative teachings. And if this exploration of Cayce's divine teachings created that sense of recognition or awakening for you, hit the like button to let me know you felt that connection too. There's a video right here that complements this topic perfectly, revealing even more about how these spiritual principles work in practical, everyday situations. Click and continue with me over there, because what we've discovered today is just the beginning of understanding how divine connection can transform every aspect of your life.